depending upon wherever you're joining from. Today, we're going to talk about what happened at Davos. Both Ray Wang and Sandy Carter were there in person, and I am obliged to thank them, to have them. I'm very lucky to have them. And Ray is super busy with the media, so is Sandy. You guys all are well aware of their work. Ray is a prolific analyst and researcher. Sandy Carter has led teams at high level at AWS and IBM. So very informed opinion we can get today from this talk. With that said, Ray, I know you have a little less time. Why don't we start with you? What are your first impressions from this year's Davos?
Well, every time when you're at Davos, what you actually think you see is like a third of the people are there to change the world, a third of the people are there to make a lot of money, and a third of the people, it's their social stop on the way to F1, Cannes, and Aspen Ideas, right? And so that confluence of people coming together really changes, the conversation, the tenor, right? And so there's core Davos, which is, the 2,500 this year, 4,000 people that showed up. And then there's this area, what we call undavos, which is literally the 5,000 other people that are coming in, to really start the conversation on the outside. And so hot topics, were, of course, what's going on with deglobalization, what's happening with the war in Ukraine, right? Sandy's going to talk about the technology topics too, but metaverse is hot, blockchain is hot. People are trying to understand where those technologies are coming. AI was hot, right? Everybody was like, every third speech, people are like, oh, I use ChatGPT to say this, right? And you're like, oh, that's like, okay, whatever. Right? But everybody was trying to jump in on that kind of conversation. I think the tenor was cautious optimism, probably the best way to put it, and a disbelief that globalization was being attacked, right? And those two things were happening at the same time, which seemed very, incongruent to a lot of folks.
Yeah, so cautious optimism, I think, is the right term, because people raised a lot of issues at the same time. They were trying to give some solutions. So Sandy, what are your first impressions before we go into questions?
Well, it was, first of all, I love going to Davos because you get this great mix of, just the confluence of country leaders and business leaders. And it's just so much energy and so much excitement. So I always love going. This was my first time going, not with a big company, so it was quite different experience for me. I hung out at a lot of side events, which I don't usually hang out at that many side events. And Ray had told me ahead of time, the side events are where it's at. And it really was. It was really amazing. I heard a lot about sustainability too. That was another really hot topic. What are we going to do about the climate? Even though there was a lot of pushback, right? Because the war and inflation is driving energy prices up. So there's now more pushback. It's not as much of the darling as it had been in the past. But I have to say, for me, my overall conclusion is it's super valuable for any business leader to go. It's super informational because you learn what the top topics are. Like, there was a lot of discussion around digital identity. I had so many discussions around digital identity, which is what we do. But I didn't bring it up. People brought it up. The metaverse, artificial intelligence, Web3, all the tech topics, which made me really excited as I went along. But then there was a lot of people that were just really curious about how everything comes together. So I thought it was really interesting. Ray led a phenomenal panel at the WIDPRO house, and he brought in, everything, but sustainability and the metaverse and digital identity. I mean, just that confluence of how all these things work together was great. It was a fabulous week for us as Unstoppable, and for me, just learning overall.
That's great. We will jump into the tech topics a little later. I want to cover some of the topics with Ray, because he has to join and Disrupt TV show in a few minutes. Ray, what are your impressions on the technology side? Actually, I want to just cover technology mostly. I'm economics buff as well, economics major, so we could cover some of that. So how is the technology shaping the economy, and were there any discussions around the data sovereignty or the role of AI and how the AI is a sort of race between countries, and in that race we can throw the humanity under the bus. It seems like it.
This is the AI ethics question. And since we're going to use the example of throwing humanity under the bus or the autonomous bus, the way we look at digital ethics is a little bit different, right? I'm going to say things a little bit off color, might get me in trouble, but hey, why not? It's on your show. It's not on mine. I'm just kidding.
You can do it.
So,
yeah, it's okay.
So AI ethics is really tough, right? It's always like two autonomous vehicles are about to get into an accident. Who lives? Is it the pregnant woman? Is it the 18-year-old athlete? Is it the lawyer? Is it the politician? Everyone says politician. Is it the doctor? Right? I mean, who gets to live, right?
Yeah.
And the short answer is, well, if you knew that there's going to be an accident, send the cars out and leave the people at home. Right? I mean, and ethics gets even more nuanced when we add culture on top of it, right? So autonomous vehicle hits a dog. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm going to offend Canadians, Russians, and people of Chinese descent. Okay. I'm just going to do that. I'm going to clear it right now. So autonomous vehicle hits a dog in Canada. What do you expect happens? Well, the vehicle is like, oh my God, let's go find another human. Let's make sure that the dog is taken care of. Let's take the dog as quickly as we can to a veterinarian. Let's apologize profusely, let everybody know exactly what's happening, provide them with details on step of the way, right? And make sure everything's taken care of, right? That would be very Canadian. And you'd be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Autonomous vehicle hits a dog in Eastern Europe. What dog? Run the dog over 3 times and go, right? I mean, that could be the perception, and that's okay. Autonomous vehicle hits a dog in some Asian country. Cost-benefit analysis. Dog lives, it's going to cost like $500,000 in like care. Dog dies, it's $1,000 fine. Hey, what's for dinner? Right. So all these things can happen. Right. And so trying to be provocative here, ethics is going to be really, really hard on that front. But we are scared, right, that the bots will take over and the humans are not in the loop. And that's why it's really important to have 3 levels of AI ethics. And we've been talking about this for some time. We actually have 5. But, the basic thing is like at least be transparent. Let's see what's in the algo. The second thing is once we understand that there's bias, and bias isn't bad, you have to be able to understand like where that bias is so you can reverse it if you need to. And then of course, you want to keep a human in the loop, right? If you don't have a human in the loop, then well, yeah, the bots are going to take over, right? So they're basic things like that were being discussed at Davos and other places about AI ethics. And I think that's going to play a role in the future. And of course, everyone's like, ooh, what about ChatGPT? What about cheating in the future? And how do you know what's real? And what's a derivative work? And is that your data? Or, hey, what's going on with Stability AI? And, a little Getty Museum suing people for images that were being used in their data sets, right? So we're going to have a lot of conversations. And you know what? Who's going to win? IP lawyers, of course.
That is true, but I think the international law / international regulators are absent. We don't you think we need a body of strengthen the existing bodies or institutions, international institutions, or create some new?
I would say that we have traditionally not been able to keep up. Our laws and regulations do not keep up as quickly as technology has progressed. I would be scared if like a European regulator is managing an American environment, and I'd be equally scared if a Chinese regulator is managing a European environment, right? I mean, this is where it becomes very cultural as to what's accepted or not, right? I'm in Europe and like, we're so worried about privacy. And I'm like, if I get in a car accident, the EU 911 system like goes off and tells you where my location is. I'm like, I wouldn't want that. Mm-hmm. If you're very privately focused, how is that going to work, right? So I think the cultural things have to be addressed. And of course, the regulators and the legislators really are clueless, right? They're trying to catch up, but tech is moving too fast for them. Maybe we should have an AI come up. No, I'm just kidding.
That was actually talked about at one of the panels, was should we bring AI into policy discussions? If I might just add in, I would say that, policy and regulation came up over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And the discussion is, if policy and regulation is going to be done by a government, how do we get them up to speed? Like, how do we educate them on AI, on Web3, on the metaverse? Yeah. Because people were talking about, privacy in the metaverse, and how do you know that it's not a 6-year-old girl running around in the metaverse versus, a 29-year-old man, right? So either if the government's going to take over, we need higher level of education and understanding and more tech people in the government. But then there was the opposite, which is should it be run more like the ethos of Web3, which says that the community manages itself and governs itself? I think those are kind of two ends of the spectrum. And I think only a few people were talking about the middle, which was, trying to get some organizations. Like I met with IEEE when I was there, and Open Metaverse Alliance that was there, and our web. I mean, there's just so many new groups that are forming to be like that middle person, right? Not the government, not a full community owned, but in that middle ground.
And then, of course, World Economic Forum launched their own metaverse.
I know. And
add to the chaos, right?
And Korea. I got invited to the Korea metaverse launch. They launched the Seoul metaverse for the city there at Davos too. So anyway, yeah, it was quite interesting, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, Korea I was at CES. The South Korea is killing it on all fronts. Actually, their digital universe, if you will, Korea's digital footprint is very visible. I mean, some parts are very like hacky and quickly put together, but they are coming from all fronts. Samsung is there, and they have some big names in their country which are supporting them.
Oh yeah, there's an industrial policy. Sure. I mean, a Korean industrial policy to get there. It's pretty wild. So.
Yep. So Ukraine was hot, and with Ukraine is tied inflation in many ways because energy is high, energy prices are high in Europe. Ray, I know you have like maybe 3 minutes. Any sort of macro views which will impact us at micro level which will impact the technology industry in general?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think they stolen my term confluence of crises, called it polycrises. But we see a bunch of things since May, right? We see interest rates, inflation, inventory, infection, and invasion. Those are at the macro level. As you know, Constellation is a futurist firm. We start with those macro Uber trends, and then we work our way down to other trends that come from there. I would say that the other trends that are happening are US versus China, BRICS versus G7, S being Saudi Arabia, not South Africa. We see a war on the US dollar, and we also see centralization versus decentralization and deglobalization versus globalization as massive factors. What does that mean for tech and IT? So we used to believe that the internet was going to connect everyone, be one big happy place, it'd be borderless. I think we are starting to see different internets evolve, right? I mean, you couldn't get into China without passing through their digital Chinese wall. There are different standards that are happening in European models. We're going to see Africa take different standards as well. So fragmentation is happening. And what that means for tech is that we have to be prepared for that. I think the second piece is the notion of nationalism versus globalism. And that is playing a role in look at what's happening with technology and chips. Right, you follow that pretty closely, Sarjeet, and you see what's happening, right, with export controls and people like today. I think the European Union is also banning exporting of tools for chip manufacturing to China, right? So this is all having some implications, but while that's happening, people that are not in governments and people that are moving around the world are basically trying to find ways to improve that level of cooperation. So we see that on the other end as well. And that means new types of standards. Sandy alluded to our friend Dirk, who's working on OMA, the Open Metaverse Association, and those standards. And, Sandy, I mean, you probably know better those standards, as those are being developed. So there's a lot of cooperation going on, just as a lot of the politics is happening.
Yeah, I think we were already unreeling from the sort of globalization because of pandemic and few other factors, the policy differences and democracy versus non-democratized systems and all that. So many reasons, right? We were unreeling from that, and in the meantime, the Ukraine war happened, and it polarized the countries even more. Then they were already polarized, right? So I think this trend will continue, and hopefully we calm down our sort of nationalistic narratives from all countries. It plays into politics of the democracies as well, because the parties which are in power in bigger democracies, they want to stay in power, and whatever narrative works with the public, they just hop onto that. And it may not be good for the country or the world as a whole, but it's good for them to win next time, right? So you talk about that many times today. I know you have to go. That's why I'm focusing on you, Sandy.
Oh,
I'm
no,
so
no,
sorry,
no
I'm
problem.
ignoring
Please.
you.
I've got another 10 minutes. So
Oh, you have 10 minutes. Okay, okay.
yeah. We're good.
So Sandy, you have any comments on what Ray said about how it impacts tech, the fighting at the Cold War level, the policy and the import export, and like who can get their hands on what, and who, like, now we are trying to ban TikTok in US, and it's not slowing down.
Yeah, like I said, I spent most of my time, like, Ray knows there are thousands of sessions happening all the time. I spent all of mine, except I did go see the First Lady of the Ukraine,
Hmm.
who was incredibly well spoken and passionate about, what needs to happen there. And I did one sustainability. Everything else I did, I was all about tech, 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 tech. So I did metaverse, I did
Hmm.
Web3, I did AI, and I did digital identity. That's where I spent my time. On the standards, though, that Ray talked about, I did spend some time with the IEEE. Quite
Oh, great.
interesting, them trying to figure out in the new world of Web3 and metaverse how they're going to fit in. A lot in the underpinning technology of the metaverse, right? The feeds and the speeds of how to get instantaneous things to happen is where they feel that they play. And then, of course, we as Unstoppable are part of the OMA3, the Open Metaverse Alliance. And while we were there, we had Seb there, who's part of it from the Sandbox. We had Dirk there. We also had Sobo there, who's with Alien Games. And we all got together and talked about, porting, how you would do some of the portaling work that's being done. How would you define land, right? Think about the standards for land. So you buy land in one metaverse and another metaverse and another metaverse. How do I keep up with it? Like where is all that stored? How do we leverage that? And is it an XY axis? Is it an IPFS address?
Hmm.
So there's so many things, and it just tells you that the market is starting to mature because it's starting to think about those things versus little siloed, like little M metaverses and the big M metaverse. Like, how does it interoperate together? So, if I had to comment on that, that's where I'd end up at.
So I believe IEEE is the very visible, not the only international institution which can play a big role here, but they are the one of the oldest existing um, standards body, which is trying to stay relevant in this new world, I will say. And
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
pretty relevant. They've been ahead of a lot of different standards. I'm pretty impressed. So.
yeah,
Yeah.
actually, they were mostly on the hardware side first, like USB and whatnot, RCA, and they come from that world, right? But they are trying to go into the software side of things, and which is always challenging. And with software moves that, I don't know, million
Yeah,
X
we got a
speed.
sense of that too, right? I mean, like on the metaverse panel that Sandy and I were on, we were in the Wipro Pavilion when we did that. I mean, we had multiple dimensions, right? We had B2B to B2C. We had industrial metaverse with the Honeywell guy. We had, a conversation really about what's happening, in, consumer experiences happening with like the founder and CEO of Mobius, right? So it was this broad range that you're starting to see. And I think there's a realization, after the fact that, yeah, all this has got to come together at some point, right? It's, I mean, there was a conversation, is it one metaverse? Are there multiple metaverses? Just like, is there one internet? Or are there multiple internets? Same kind of discussion. And, for many of us who were around in 1997, like just as we were seeing like AOL, HTTP, what's HTML? What's this thing called like Yahoo, right?
Yeah.
What's eBay? Like how do these things are all coming together? That's what it feels like right now. So we're just at that beginning conversation. And the good news is like people have been through it. They know that, hey, standards are going to help us more than not having standards.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I thought was impressive that I wasn't expecting was almost the general agreement in every session I went to that AI was going to be a tool to help humans, not replace
Yeah,
humans.
I agree.
So the conversation I think in the past is all centered around, oh my gosh, humans are going to be completely replaced, right? There were a couple of people who said, oh, I've replaced my entire marketing department with ChatGPT. But for the majority of the conversations that I was in and the workshops, it was what we need to do now is teach humans how to use AI tools, how we can leverage them. So, for example, I was sitting beside a CEO and he said, I wrote up my KPIs and I leveraged DALI and ChatGPT to say, what would you think my KPIs would be? And I used that to augment what I thought. The same thing, I was with a CMO and she was saying, oh no, I'm never going to replace my entire PR team. But what I did do is I had my team write a press release and then I had ChatGPT write one and I took the best from both. So it really augmented what I was doing. So there was a lot of arguments for augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, which I thought was a very healthy conversation. And again, day after day, I heard this. So I felt like we had come a long way from fear factor to, wow, these really are good tools. They really can help us move forward. I actually took down a list that I started tweeting last night of about 20, I think it's 26 AI tools that I want to try out. Tools for podcasting, for looking at when you should post your social media, to copywriting, to KPI producing. I mean, it was really fascinating to see all the tools that can augment what you're doing.
Yeah, no, those are great points. And one of the fun things is that we break up almost everything when we think about operating. So operating at machine scale for humans, and is this kind of like where we're at, right? And so we look at every business process and we say there's 4 questions you have to ask when you're going to do full intelligent automation, and there are going to be a lot of cases for that. Highly repetitive tasks, things massive volume, lots of nodes of interaction, like get us distracted. And then we look at when do you augment the machine with human, where we got to get to the level of precision you're going to be comfortable with. Are you going to see an AI physician? I don't know about that, right? So we got to get to higher level precision. We get the confidence level where we're training the machines so that we can figure out false positives. And then when do we augment humans with machines? And that's what we're talking about now, that augmentation process, so that we can actually get to our fuller self. And then, of course, when do you want the human touch? Right? When do you want to personalize things? When you want to get things to a point where you're like, oh, right, I want to insert friction because it's a good friction. I want to insert a human because I want to make sure there's last set of judgment before Skynet takes over, right? Just kidding. But something like that, right? That's kind of what we're trying to get to, right? And I think we're going to see that evolve in all those conversations as automation takes place. But the interesting piece about what you said, Sandy, and what you're kind of touching on, Sarjeet, is that decision velocity becomes even more important. Companies that can make decisions faster are going to win, and machines are making decisions 100 times per second, even 1,000 times per second. And if you can capitalize on that, you have an exponential advantage. And I think people are just grasping that right now.
Yeah, I think that basically the ChatGPT models are large language models, and they are looking at the world's knowledge and they're extracting those answers for you from that vast database, of the world knowledge, and all these books are fed into it, and the internet is fed into it, and so much more. And I think the coming up with new ideas, new algorithms, like it cannot come up with that, at least so far, at least not for next few years, I believe. Human creativity will still play a huge role. But having said that, anybody who is scared of AI will get hurt by it. If you have to embrace it, that's what I'm trying to say. You have to embrace it. You have to leverage it to your productivity as an enterprise, as an individual as well, right?
Yeah, that was actually another big point that came up, is use of AI, not just for business, but for personal too. So actually, Ray introduced me to a CEO at one of the sessions, and she and I sat and chatted. She was telling me how much she uses AI in her personal life, from scheduling her calendar to evaluating her workout routine. Like I did, I ran yesterday, I swam today. Okay, today you have to do weights. To evaluating her food choices. Like, okay, you had this, you need to do this. That was fascinating because I had never thought about that. I always think about AI for my business. And then, of course, Alexa, but AI for my business, but not for AI to help me on all these other things. So I have another whole list of apps I'm going to try out that she gave me as well.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
she was tech chic. She was geek chic, actually. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
I
That's
mean,
true.
we won't say who she was, but she recently let go of a bunch of their sales and marketing folks and went full automation, which is pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that popping up everywhere too, as people are trying to figure out how to get to those levels of efficiency for what they're doing.
I
So,
think we should spend some more time on the metaverse, though. I know people are very skeptical about it, but I have to say, every lunch, every dinner, I was doing breakfast one day and people were talking about the metaverse. Like, what are the use cases? I'm trying this, I'm trying that, I'm going to do this. And again, we talked about the World Economic Forum announced a metaverse. Korea, Seoul announced a metaverse. While we were there, we heard about use cases for onboarding. Accenture did a really deep dive on how they're using the metaverse for onboarding. For training, I heard from Harvard University was doing some training experiments. I'm working on it with the university. For obviously for retail and for branding and for awareness. It was just amazing to me how many
yeah.
experiments are going on and how many enterprises at a top level, CEO, CMO level, are using and leveraging the metaverse today. So for me, I was quite surprised with that. Um, Even people saying, every enterprise needs to pay attention to it. And, also I was looking for case studies. There were like 100, I counted like 101 sessions where companies were presenting their use case, like BMW presenting how they were using it. And my conclusion was the metaverse can do a better job at engagement, keeping someone really engaged, whether it's an industrial metaverse or a B2C metaverse. I think it does a better job at reaching a new audience. I found that was a good case study that would be a reason to try a better job at retention of information because of the experience it creates. And definitely for the next generation, it's like a no-brainer. They value digital assets so much more than we do. Did you agree, Ray?
Oh no, definitely. And building on their use cases, we built a map of 43 enterprise use cases. We always thought that B2C would pick up before B2B. And I think the enterprise is actually embracing metaverse first because of those concrete examples you're talking about, Sandy. And we saw it everywhere from, I mean, this is a pet peeve of mine. Like, if I could get rid of title companies, I'd love that, right? Be able to get all my title on the
I know
NFT, the
that's
whole chain is there. I'm done,
Yeah.
right? I'm in.
most cumbersome
It's
process.
Yeah, and I don't
horrible,
know.
right?
And yesterday the DMV announced a blockchain metaverse. Did you see that? The DMV in
Yes.
California, where you live,
Oh
where
yeah.
you guys both live, actually.
So yeah, no, we're like, oh, okay, this is gonna be pretty cool. And but there are other use cases too, and we talked about it a little bit, at Davos, the notion of think about non-biased recruiting, right? My avatar is interviewing your avatar. You cannot tell accents. Like I can always hear accents. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's East Baltimore. Oh, wait, that's Detroit. Yeah, that's Atlanta. Oh, wait, that sounds like Omaha, right? I mean, like I can tell those accents, right? And biases would come normally from it. Like the other day, I'm like, oh, wait, we're in the Manila, Philippines contact center. The lady's like, how do you know? I'm like, totally, we are. It's like you see that. I'm like, please connect to a U.S. center that actually has permission to do work, right? That can actually help me with this problem. And she's like, she just laughed, right? She's like, how did you know? I'm like, well, okay, but that goes away, right? You interview people, right? You don't see their gender, you don't hear their accents, you don't hear their pacing, right? And suddenly you have a very, very interesting experience, right? The field service training example, or even recruiting, like you say you really know how to work on an oil rig. Okay, let's suit you up, put you in haptics, see what you do, right? Get used to it. Oh wait, you really don't know what you're doing. Or wait, we just onboarded you. We're going to take the same simulation
Training,
and put
yeah.
you on training, right? So safety training, we'll get you all ready to go, and then maybe we're going to solve a problem together in a collaborative mode. So all those AR, VR use cases, remember from 13 years ago, they're back. so
Yeah,
True.
there were some fringe cases like with 3D printing. They were printing parts for the oil rigs in the middle of ocean because otherwise you have to fly, you take a ship somewhere, then fly helicopter to the oil rig because it's a dangerous place. And there are so many use cases, but they are the economics of those is not that much favorable for masses to adopt it as we make things cheaper with the betterment of processes and technologies, and material sciences are improving as well, right? So all these things will play a role into it, like because if you're wearing gloves and if they are not soft enough, and then if they can't move at the speed of our fingers, then will be jittery, right? So yeah, on that note, Sandy, I'm glad you brought up the metaverse. The metaverse and blockchain, of course, they are closely related, and the blockchain is very closely related to the crypto. And I think crypto has all these debacles or these big scandals in crypto have done a big sort of disfavor, it was a big blow to any adjacent sort of disciplines, right? And that spills into other disciplines as well. Do you think it spilled into metaverse as well? Definitely blockchain. It did a little bit, but it was outside the.
It's a use case. Oops.
Go
It's a
ahead.
use case. I mean, crypto is a use case of blockchain, right? It's not the only use case. It is a use case.
Yeah. No,
But I mean, there are metaverses where crypto is required, but it's not really directly connected. I think Web3 is probably more connected to crypto. But I will tell you, I've never used the C word. I will say in our business, we always talk about Web3 and the metaverse and blockchain. And I saw that a lot this time, right? There was the blockchain hub, there was the Web3 summit, there were metaverse. Nobody even
That
talked
C
about
word just
crypto.
disappeared. I don't know what you're
I
talking
know.
about, Sandy. I mean,
Yeah.
what is
The
that
C
C word?
Yeah, you can't say the C word. So I do think, especially with FTX, there was just such a
Oh, where did FTX
going
go? I
on.
think they're all gone, you know.
It's
Yeah,
true.
actually,
Yeah.
I always said that from the get-go. I was like you can't use this as a currency. The coins are just scams, and like a coin's value
There's
should
no
not be more
controls.
than the
There's no
utility,
controls.
the utility which comes from its programmability. That's what it is. Like after that, it's like what's the utility of it? It's not commodity. It's not currency.
But let's call what was going on, right? Like that was the scam Ponzi scheme of the decade, right? I mean, we get one of those every like 20 years, and that's what it was. It just happened to be in that technology. The rest of the technology, as people have kind of like, we've gone away from the hype. Now everyone's actually focused on real use cases. I mean, easily in the next 18 to 24 months, we're going to see some crazy stuff. Prop tech, right, with NFTs and what we're talking about. That wasn't just titles, right? There's a whole bunch of things. Asset classes and financial securities are going to pop up. Those are going to be super exciting. And then, of course, we're going to see a whole bunch of new immersive experiences pop up, and that things like we saw for Mobius, right? Things that we saw with the volumetric stuff at Accenture. Like I think Sandy, you saw that.
Yep.
If you were brave enough to make your way to the Sunstar Hotel, worst place ever to put an event, a lot of hiking. It means you're going uphill on the top of the Alps, uphill in the ice, right? If you made it there and you were never going to leave, right? But once you're in there, right, there's great conversations about what people are doing with digital twins and industrial metaverse, right? I mean, those were some great conversations. But I'm gonna have to exit. But thank you for having me.
Thanks, I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Ray.
Actually, we'll just go a few more minutes, and thank you, and have a great show on
See you on
your
Disrupt TV.
on your
Me
weekly
too,
show.
Ray. Yeah.
Actually, if to my viewers here, check out Ray's weekly Disrupt show, and check him out on Fox TV and many other media outlets. Thank you, Ray. Appreciate it.
See you guys. Hey, bye.
See
Thank
ya.
you.
See you, Ray. Bye-bye.
My, okay, so it messes up my pre-setup. Let me see if I can
Sure.
go to the other one. 3 people, 2 people. Oh, now 2 Sandys. I need to fix this. Just stay with me, people. On the
Geez, Sandy,
fly.
but while you're doing that, I'll also just share what I learned about digital identity, because digital identity also came up a lot. Digital identity as a human right. So let me explain what digital identity is. So digital identity is a platform where you own your data about yourself versus another platform company owning your data. So instead of a Google or an Amazon or someone else owning the data, you personally own your own data. And therefore you can be rewarded for it. You can use it as you want. You can have that privacy and security that you need as well. This came up a lot. In fact, at the WIF, they called it digital identity as a human right, like making it the 31st human right, which of course I love, because that's what we do here at Unstoppable. The other place it was really talked about a lot is that, if you think about the metaverse, people are at the center of the metaverse.
Yeah.
And that's how they build their reputation. And that's how they, just like we are today, like you want to be the same person as you walk around to different events. So people know you, you gain a reputation. The same thing is true in the metaverse. And how do you do that? Well, you do that through a digital identity. So there was lots of sessions on digital identity and the metaverse and how you use those together and how this becomes the gateway to Web3 and the metaverse, with privacy and security obviously top of mind. So I thought that was some of the other interesting discussions. Estonia has been doing digital identity for a long time. Great case study that I heard on Estonia, for example, and then just tons of other people looking at it. It's one of the places we're looking at for OMA3, the Open Metaverse Alliance. How do you have an identity that can travel with you through the metaverse as well? Did I
And
give you enough time to fix it?
yeah, that gave me time. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're
And I
welcome.
was listening to you carefully as well. And actually, remember when we connected after you left AWS? We connected at AWS, and you joined Unstoppable Domains. And I strongly believe that Unstoppable Domains can give, like, a company like, there will be many actually, including you guys, give that digital identity to the masses, right? Just like we have social security number, but that's very country specific, right? What we need is a global, unique ID given to every thing and every person. It's not only person as well, it's a thing as well. IoT will use these digital identities as well. So I think that idea is taking hold, but it's taking hold slower than what I thought it will. What's your viewpoint?
We're accelerating with digital identity in this space. I would say there is a lot of resistance to it because it changes the whole game, right? When you as an individual own your data,
Mm-hmm.
how would something like Chat GPT work, trying to get data from all people versus pulling it from sources or platforms or that sort of thing? A lot of people make money on selling your data, right?
Yeah.
Facebook and Google made $100 billion. So there's resistance that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think right now, this is still part of Web3. I think that there's still a lot of UI work that has to be done and still a lot of extra things that have to be done to make it easy to use and easy to understand. I do believe it's going to take off, though. I mean, the discussions at Davos last week got me really excited and really pumped up on what we needed to do and what we needed to bring, into that discussion. So for me, that was really what I took away. I do think it needs to accelerate, but I think there are some things that are roadblocks right now for great acceleration.
Yeah, I can totally understand the resistance from the incumbents, like Facebook and others, but like Facebook has become an incumbent for God's sake. It's a new company relatively, but I think the another sort of missed opportunity is the DevRel part of it, developer relations. Like it's not easy to weave these identities or digital identities into existing applications. Like, yes, there are newer frameworks and newer platforms which people have to learn, but if we can bring it to what people are so used to on day-to-day basis as their platform for development, right? Python libraries and Node and whatever are people using a lot of hands on there are like millions of developers using certain technologies, so focusing on them as compared to focusing on 500,000 who are just hopping onto these newer platforms. I think that vendors like you guys can do a better job. And I'm not mentioning the vendor names much, but that's always my goal. But I think that's the trick to make it fly farther and higher.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also found I mean, for me, I was quite surprised that AI and digital identity and the metaverse were like the three core topics that were announced around tech versus I had expected maybe cloud. I know cloud was talked about last time, but I expected cloud. I expected like security and ransomware too a lot more. I didn't really, and except in the context of how do we do security and privacy for digital identity or for the metaverse or for AI. It wasn't like on it's an own topic.
Hmm.
I found that interesting. And then, I don't know, maybe days later or maybe a day before, Gartner announced that metaverse was in its top 10. And of course, AI was as well, and digital identity. And then McKinsey came out with their list and they were in there too. So, anyway, that was one of the things that was surprising to me about the event was how much time was spent on those topics.
Yeah, I think, okay, there are two things here, two little comments from me as a host. I think um, there's a book written by a Nobel Prize winner economist. It's called Narrative Economics, right? So narratives take hold of the industries, of nations, of universe, all the countries, the globe, if you will, and then everybody hops onto it because they don't want to miss it. There's FOMO, and there's also the in this case the FOMO is like we don't want to come across as less competitive as a country or as a company, so they start singing that song, even like 80% of them don't believe deep down that they can do anything about it anytime soon, but they do it anyways. So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is the cloud. Your comment on the cloud is going into the background. Cloud is ubiquitous. Cloud has become, I should say, such a good technology that we don't need to talk about it anymore. So technology is very good when we stop talking about it. Technology
Mm.
is immature when we talk a lot about it. That's how,
Mm.
how I see it.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, I think it may have been Ray or maybe one of the other panel modelers. They asked me, okay, 2 years from now, of all the topics we've talked about, what would be success? And I said, well, if we're not talking about the metaverse and we're not talking about AI and we're not talking about Web3, those all become invisible. And we're talking about customer experience and customer engagement. And the tools that you use to get there are the metaverse and digital identity and AI. That would be success to me. So you're probably right. Maybe those have now become more behind the scenes. Yeah, I think it's interesting. But you and I both coming from a cloud background, I just thought that was
I know,
fascinating
I know. We want
that
to
it
hear
wasn't
more.
front and center. And even though there was like a huge Microsoft house and an Amazon house, and all the people were there with their cloud messages, it just wasn't top of mind.
Yeah, actually, cloud is enabling all these technologies. If you look at the large language models, it's trained. The one we are talking about a lot more is the Chat GPT from OpenAI. It's trained at Azure, and Azure made some specific tweaking to their cloud so they can make that training possible. Which is economical and viable, in every which way. So cloud is playing a huge role in all sort of technologies, like metaverse, of course, it's playing a role there as well. And Web3, a lot of people started talking about Web3 is totally decentralized and this and that, but like you cannot totally create a parallel universe to what we have right now. You have to plug it into the cloud, which is Web 2, you can call it whatever you call that generation of technology. And some people take the narratives, again coming back to the narrative economics, to the extreme level that, hey, we don't need any government interference, we don't need any this and that, and then 6 months later they are begging for the governments to jump in and give some regulation to their industry because it's falling apart now, right?
Yep.
So those zigzags are there. There some people, like, they take things to extreme, and for publicity and or for financial gains, they just muddy the waters.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe why digital identity emerged versus Web3. Digital identity is part of Web3. It's what gives you ownership of data and digital identity. And they kind of removed the decentralization, even though it was tucked underneath.
Yeah.
I think that's why that digital identity piece emerged, if you would.
Yeah. Some narratives like get a lot of pushback, and bright minds out there also know that you can't do the decentralization. There's no one global system which has this governance and there are no global rules. So how will you run a global system? So like, the two countries can't agree on things. You are asking like, 150 plus or whatever the number of countries, 200 plus countries
Yeah.
agreeing on things. Now that's not possible. So that's a great discussion, actually. Anshuman, yeah, to prove that we are live, it's not recorded. Anshuman said something about the Satya Nadella talked about the AI being a co-pilot. Actually, yeah, I agree. I think they talked. The co-pilot is a name for the name of the product for developers. A co-pilot for developers, right? I believe, and many other people have said that too, that we will have co-pilots for doctors, for nurses, for
Yep.
mechanics, for lawyers. So we will have the co-pilot for many types of personas or roles or people who work today, and they go to work and or they work from home. So we will have AI as a big co-pilot, if you will. So we are live. Anshuman, thanks for joining. Uh, and anything else I have missed which you want to mention, which was very stark, and or what's coming up? Like any predictions you want to make for 2023? While we're
Well, I
here.
mean, this is the way that I would summarize it. I think that Davos is a great place to meet incredible people. Probably the most exclusive conference for meeting CEOs, CMO, the C-suite, and country officials. If you're looking or you need access at that level, I would look at Davos to be there. Um, I would say, I again was really focused on these three tech trends, and obviously sustainability, community, and inflation or the economic stability, all were topics as well. I just didn't happen to spend time there. I just didn't have the time. But I love that these three trends, metaverse, I thought was quite fascinating. What is it? How can we use it? Here's 100 use cases. Artificial intelligence being that augmented intelligence, so it's helping
Yeah.
us, and then
Awesome.
that digital identity piece to ensure that you own your data as a human right, maybe becoming the 31st human right. So that was kind of my takeaways from the conference overall.
Yeah, great summary. Actually, I think all these topics are intertwined. The inflation happened because of supply chain sort of mismanagement and COVID, and technology can help in that area, right? So climate is a big topic as well for last few years at World Economic Forum, and the technology can help there big time as well, right? So, and we have to be cognizant of the energy usage in data centers as well, like how we are lowering that, and then low power chips and whatnot, right? So yeah, technology actually is also, I believe, solution to our inflationary sort of problems. Like in technology in general is deflationary sort of construct or discipline, if you will. With more automation, we can make the things cheaply, and move things cheaply and sell them cheaply as well. So
Yep.
with that said, thank you very much for joining, and thanks for folks for joining who joined, and thanks for listening afterwards. I know that it's very hard to join in the middle of the day or weekday, and many of you will listen later. Follow Sandy on Twitter and or LinkedIn. She's a great leader, very approachable. She does a lot of work in women in tech, actually. The girls, my daughters, I have two daughters, are very much interested in that sort of concept as well. Women needs to come to the forefront of these technologies. So if they're listening, approach Sandy, and Sandy, thanks for doing work in that area as well. So I want to personally
You're
thank you for
welcome.
that.
And
And with
thank you
that,
all thanks for listening too. Really appreciate it. My Twitter handle is Sandy_Carter. I know I just got a couple people trying to reach out, so I just wanted you to know that too. Thank you for being a great host and for always being on top of these great conversations.
thanks, Sandy. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody.
Bye.